The morning sun rose over New Seoul Colony like any other day, but Nara Kim felt something was wrong. She stood at the window of the engineering lab, watching the purple sky of Kepler 442b slowly brighten to orange. The twin moons were still visible, hanging like pale ghosts in the alien dawn. Something in the air felt different today, heavy and electric like the moments before a storm. Nara brushed her long black hair from her face and turned back to her workstation. At 19, she was the youngest student ever admitted to the colony's advanced engineering program. Her fingers moved quickly over the holographic displays, checking the power grid systems that kept their small world running. The colony of New Seoul was home to 50,000 humans, all trying to build a new life on this distant planet, far from Earth. The colony had been peaceful for 3 years since the first settlers arrived. They built their homes in the valleys, between tall purple mountains where strange flowers bloomed that glowed softly in the dark. The colonists grew their food in vast greenhouses and mined precious metals from the mountain caves. Children played in parks filled with earth trees that somehow managed to grow in the alien soil. It was a good life, a safe life. But safety was about to end. Nara's communicator buzzed. It was her older brother Dai calling from the defense center, where he worked as an officer. His voice sounded tight with worry. "Nara, where are you right now?" Dai asked. "At the lab working on the morning grid check," she replied. "Why do you sound scared?" "Our sensors picked up something strange. Ships coming toward the planet. Big ships. They don't answer our calls." Nara felt ice in her stomach. "How big?" "Big. Enough to carry an army." Through the lab window, Nara saw parents hurrying their children toward the school buildings. Teachers were calling students inside earlier than usual. The colony's emergency protocols were starting, even though no alarm had sounded yet. People could sense danger coming. "Stay where you are," Dai said. "Don't go outside until I call you back." But Nara could not stay still. She looked out the window again and saw something that made her heart race. Mrs. Yoon was trying to carry her baby and pull her 5-year-old son toward the school at the same time. The little boy kept stopping to look at the pretty flowers along the path. He did not understand the danger. Nara made a choice. She grabbed her toolkit and ran outside. "Minho, come on," she called to the little boy. "Let's race to school." The child smiled and ran toward her. Nara scooped him up and helped Mrs. Yoon carry her things. They were almost to the school when the sky split open. The alien ships came through what looked like tears in space itself. They were massive, each one the size of a city block, made of some kind of dark metal that seemed to absorb light. The ships had no smooth curves like human vessels. Instead, they were all sharp angles and crystal spikes like someone had built starships out of broken glass. The attack began without warning. Beams of red energy shot down from the ships, striking the colony's defense towers. The towers exploded in clouds of smoke and fire. The power grid that Nara had been checking that morning went dead. Emergency lights flickered on throughout the colony, casting everything in an eerie red glow. People screamed and ran in all directions. Some headed for the underground shelters. Others tried to reach their families. Parents called out names of their children. The organized evacuation plan fell apart in seconds. Nara pushed Minho into Mrs. Yoon's arms. "Get to the shelter under the school," she shouted over the noise of explosions. "I'll help get more kids inside." She ran back toward the playground where children stood frozen with fear. These were kids she had helped teach basic engineering principles during weekend classes. They knew her face and trusted her. "Everyone, hold hands," Nara called out. "We're going on an adventure inside the big building." She made her voice sound calm and happy, even though her hands were shaking. The children formed a line, the older ones helping the younger ones. Nara led them toward the school entrance, counting heads as they moved. That was when the alien soldiers landed. They came down in small ships that looked like metal insects. When the ships opened, the creatures inside stepped out, and Nara felt her breath catch. They were tall, much taller than humans, with bodies that seemed to be made of living crystal. Their skin reflected light in rainbow patterns, and their faces had no expressions that humans could read. They moved with perfect, coordination, like parts of a single mind. The crystal beings carried weapons that hummed with energy. They did not shoot randomly like human soldiers might. Instead, they moved through the colony with purpose, choosing their targets carefully. They shot the communication towers, the power stations, and the defense posts. But when they encountered humans, they did something different. They captured them. Nara watched in horror as the aliens surrounded groups of colonists. They used some kind of energy field to paralyze people, then carried them toward their ships. They seemed especially interested in the younger colonists, both children and young adults. "Miss Nara," one of the children whispered. "I'm scared." "It's going to be okay," she lied, still moving them toward the school. "We just need to get inside." But the alien soldiers had noticed their group. 3 of the crystal beings turned toward them, their weapons beginning to glow. Nara felt time slow down. She could push the children toward the school and try to run. Maybe some of them would make it to safety. Or she could do something else. She made her choice. "Run to the school," she told the children, pushing them forward. "Run fast and don't look back." Then she turned toward the alien soldiers and started walking directly at them, her hands raised but not in surrender. She was drawing their attention away from the children, making herself the bigger target. The aliens stopped advancing toward the school, their attention focused entirely on Nara. She could see her reflection in their crystal faces, multiplied dozens of times. They spoke to each other in sounds like breaking glass, too fast and strange for her to understand. Behind her, she heard the children's footsteps reaching the school entrance. Most of them made it inside. She had bought them enough time. One of the alien soldiers raised its weapon, but instead of shooting energy that would kill, it shot a blue beam that made Nara's muscles lock up. She could not move, could not speak, could barely breathe. Her body became a prison she could not escape. The aliens approached her carefully, as if she were dangerous despite being paralyzed. They spoke more of their glass-breaking language, and Nara got the feeling they were excited about something. One of them pulled out a device that scanned her body with purple light. More alien soldiers arrived, carrying other captured humans. Nara recognized some faces from the colony, people she had known for years. But she noticed something that made her stomach turn cold. Most of the prisoners were young, between 15 and 25 years old. The aliens were specifically choosing the youngest adults they could find. They carried Nara and the other prisoners toward their ships. As they moved, she caught glimpses of the colony burning behind them. Some buildings were destroyed, but others were untouched. The aliens had not come to destroy New Sol completely. They had come to take something specific. They had come to take the young humans. The alien ship's entrance opened like a flower made of metal and crystal. Inside, strange lights pulsed in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The air smelled like electricity and something else, something that reminded Nara of hospitals and fear. As they carried her deeper into the ship, Nara heard the entrance closing behind them with a sound like a tomb sealing shut. Through the crystal wall, she could see New Sol growing smaller below them as the ship lifted into space. Her brother Day was down there somewhere, probably trying to organize a rescue. Her friend Yuna was probably helping treat wounded colonists in the medical center. Her teachers, her neighbors, everyone she cared about was falling away beneath the alien vessel. But the children were safe in the school. That had to be enough. The inside of the alien ship was nothing like anything humans had built. The walls curved and twisted in ways that made Nara's eyes hurt to follow. Lights pulsed through the crystal surfaces in colors that had no names in human language. The air tasted of metal and ozone, and every breath felt like breathing liquid electricity. Nara found herself in a holding cell with 12 other human prisoners, all young colonists like herself. The paralysis beam had worn off, but thick energy barriers kept them trapped. The cell had no furniture, no windows. Nothing but smooth crystal walls that reflected their scared faces back at them dozens of times. "Does anyone know what they want?" whispered Hana, a girl who worked in the colony's food distribution center. "Information, probably," said Mook, a young man from the mining crews. "They always want information in the stories. But Nara had been thinking about the attack, replaying it in her mind. The aliens had been too organized, too specific in their targets. They knew exactly where to find the defense towers, the communication, arrays, the power grid control stations. Someone had given them detailed maps of New Sol. They already have information about our colony, she said quietly. They knew where everything was before they attacked. Then what do they want us for? Asked Hana. Before anyone could answer, the energy barrier disappeared. 3 alien soldiers entered the cell. Up close, Nara could see that their crystal skin was not solid like rock, but moved and flowed like thick liquid. Patterns of light traveled through their bodies, possibly some form of communication. The aliens pointed at Nara with weapons that hummed with contained energy. One of them made sounds like wind chimes in a storm. The translation device on its belt turned the sounds into words humans could understand. This one comes now. 2 soldiers grabbed Nara's arms. Their touch was cold like touching ice, and where their fingers pressed against her skin, she felt a tingling numbness spreading up her arms. They pulled her from the cell, while the other prisoners watched with fear in their eyes. The corridors of the ship seemed to go on forever, twisting and branching like the inside of a seashell. Nara tried to memorize the path, counting turns and noting landmarks, but the alien architecture made no sense to human eyes. Everything looked the same, and different at once. They brought her to a large chamber at what felt like the center of the ship. The room was round with a high ceiling that disappeared into shadows. In the center stood a chair made of the same flowing crystal as the alien's skin. Around the chair, strange devices hung from the ceiling like mechanical spiders. 2 more aliens waited in the chamber. One was taller than the soldiers, with more complex light patterns flowing through its crystal body. The other was smaller, but carried devices that Nara instinctively knew were designed to cause pain. The tall alien spoke, first its translator converting the glasswind sounds into cold, precise words. I am Commander Kira of the Vortan Empire. You are Nara Kim. Access level 7 in your colony's engineering systems. Nara's blood went cold. They knew her name, her job, her security clearance. The aliens had not just attacked randomly. They had studied the colonists, learned who had access to important systems. How do you know that? She asked. We know many things about your species, Commander Kira replied. We know you are weak. We know you break easily. We know you will tell us what we want to know. The smaller alien stepped forward. Its translator gave its voice a different tone, higher and sharper than the commander's. I am Thex. I specialize in extracting information from inferior species. Your people interest me. So young, so fragile, yet you spread across the galaxy like insects. The soldiers forced Nara into the crystal chair. As soon as she touched it, the chair began to change, growing restraints that wrapped around her arms and legs like living vines. The crystal felt cold against her skin, but underneath the cold was something else, a vibration that seemed to reach into her bones. What do you want? Nara asked, though she already suspected the answer. Your colony's defense grid access codes, Commander Kira said. Your emergency protocols, the locations of your weapons stockpiles, the communication frequencies for your military vessels. Why would I tell you any of that? Thex moved closer, its crystal face reflecting Nara's image in fractured pieces. Because if you do not, the pain will be beyond anything your species has ever experienced. We have broken thousands of civilizations, child. Your people will be no different. One of the mechanical spiders descended from the ceiling, its metal legs clicking against the crystal floor. At its center was a device that looked like a flower made of silver thorns. The device attached itself to Nara's temple, and immediately her world exploded into agony. The pain was not like anything physical. It felt like someone was setting her thoughts on fire while simultaneously drowning her in ice water. Every nerve in her body screamed at once while her mind tried to tear itself apart. She heard herself making sounds she did not recognize, animal noises of pure suffering. The device stopped after what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Nara gasped for air, her whole body shaking. That was level 1, Thex said with what might have been amusement. We have 10 levels. No species has ever experienced level 10 and remained conscious. I won't tell you anything, Nara whispered through chattering teeth. You will. They all do. The torture began in earnest. Thex was methodical, scientific in its approach to breaking her mind. The neural disruptor caused different types of pain at different settings. Sometimes it felt like her brain was being pulled apart, neuron by neuron. Other times it was like being struck by lightning while falling into an endless pit of darkness. Between sessions, they tried other methods. They showed her holographic images of New Soul burning. Though she could not tell if the images were real or fabricated, they played sounds that human ears were never meant to hear, frequencies that made her teeth ache and her vision blur. Commander Kira watched everything with cold interest. Your species is more resilient than we expected, it said during one rest period. Most beings break within the first few minutes. Humans are stubborn. Nara gasped. It's what we're good at. Stubbornness will not save you. Or your colony. They brought in other devices. A helmet that made her experience her worst fears as if they were real. Restraints that pressed against pressure points, causing pain without permanent damage. A chamber that removed all sound and light, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the echo of recent agony. Through it all, Nara held on to one thought. The children had made it to the school. Whatever happened to her, those kids were safe. That had to be worth something. But as the torture continued, she felt her resolve beginning to crack. The pain was beyond human endurance, designed by aliens who had perfected suffering across 1,000 worlds. Her body was failing, her mind fragmenting like glass under pressure. Thex seemed to sense her weakening. It leaned closer, its crystal, face reflecting her tear-streaked features. You're almost ready to talk. I can see it in your biorhythms. Your heart rate, your brain waves, your cellular stress indicators. They all tell me you are reaching your breaking point. Go to hell, Nara whispered. There is no hell for my species, Thex replied. But we have created one for yours. The neural disruptor activated again, this time at a setting higher than anything they had used before. Nara's back arched against the restraints as every synapse in her brain fired at once. She could feel her thoughts scattering like leaves in a hurricane, her sense of self dissolving into pure, undiluted agony. Time became meaningless. There was only pain, and the awareness of pain, and the knowledge that it would never end. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a caged bird trying to escape. Her lungs burned as she forgot how to breathe properly. Commander Kira checked its instruments. Her life signs are becoming erratic. She will hold together, Thex said confidently. Human physiology is weak, but not this weak. I have calculated the exact limits of her endurance, but Thex was wrong. It had studied human biology, human psychology, human responses to stress and trauma. What it had not accounted for was the fact that Nara had been running on pure adrenaline and determination since the attack began. She had not eaten, had barely slept, and had exhausted her physical and emotional reserves trying to save the colonies. Children! The neural disruptor fired again, and this time Nara's heart simply stopped. The monitors around the chair began screaming warnings. Nara's body went limp in the crystal restraints, her eyes staring sightlessly at the ceiling. Her chest no longer rose and fell. Thex moved quickly, checking readings and adjusting instruments. Impossible. The pain threshold was well within acceptable parameters. Commander Kira approached the chair, its light pattern shifting to what might have been annoyance. Can you revive her? Her brain activity has ceased. Her heart has stopped. By all measurements of biology, this creature is dead. Then we have lost our primary source of information. We have other prisoners, Thex reminded its commander. This was merely the weakest of them. But as they spoke, neither alien noticed something that their instruments, designed for other species, failed to detect. Deep in Nara's brain, in regions that controlled the most primitive survival instincts, tiny sparks of bioelectrical activity continued to pulse. Death was not what Nara expected. Instead of darkness or light, she found herself standing in the engineering lab back at New Sol. But everything was wrong. The walls breathed like living things, and the control panels showed readouts in languages that did not exist. The purple sky outside the window was filled with stars that spelled out equations she almost understood. She was not alone in this strange place. Other figures moved through the lab, humans, but not quite human. They had faces she recognized but could not name, people who looked like they had lived through terrible things and found something powerful on the other side. "You're not supposed to be here yet," said one of them, a woman whose eyes held depths, like black holes. "It's too early." "I didn't choose to come here," Nara replied, surprised that she could speak. "They killed me." "We know. We felt it happen. But you have to go back." "Back where?" "I'm dead." The woman smiled, and her smile contained more knowledge than any human should possess. "Death is not the end for our species. It's just another problem to solve." Around them, the impossible engineering lab began to shift and change. The breathing walls showed images of human history, but not the version taught in schools. This was the real history, the story of a species that refused to stay extinct no matter what the universe threw at them. Plague, war, natural disasters, alien invasions, cosmic catastrophes all survived and overcome. "Look," said another figure, pointing to the walls. "See what we really are." Nara watched in fascination as the images showed humans adapting to environments that should have killed them, living on worlds with poisonous atmospheres, surviving in the vacuum of space, thriving in conditions that destroyed other civilizations. But more than that, she saw humans coming back from injuries and traumas that should have been permanent. "We heal," she whispered, beginning to understand. "More than heal," the first woman corrected. "We transcend. Every time something tries to break us, we learn from it. Every time something tries to kill us, we come back stronger." The lab began to fade around them, but Nara felt something new flowing through her consciousness. It was knowledge, but not the kind that came from books or teachers. This was understanding written into her DNA, inherited from millions of years of ancestors who had survived impossible odds. "The aliens think they know about torture," said the woman. "They think pain is a tool for breaking minds. They don't understand that for humans, pain is just information, and we learn from information." Nara felt herself being pulled back toward something bright and overwhelming. But before she left this strange place between life and death, the woman grabbed her hand. "Remember," she said urgently, "fear is the cage they build around your mind. Without fear, there are no limits to what humans can do." The last thing Nara heard before the world exploded back into existence was the sound of her own heart starting to beat again. Her eyes opened. The alien torture chamber materialized around her in sharp focus. Every crystal surface, every hanging instrument, every detail was suddenly clear with a precision that felt superhuman. She could see the molecular structure of the restraints holding her, understanding their composition and weaknesses as if she had built them herself. Commander Kira and Thex stood near the monitoring stations, discussing something in their wind chime language. They had not noticed her return yet. The instruments still showed her as dead, her biosignatures flatlining. But Nara was very much alive, and something fundamental had changed inside her. The fear was gone, not reduced or controlled, but completely absent, as if someone had surgically removed it from her brain. In its place was a cold, analytical awareness that processed everything around her with perfect clarity. She could see 17 different ways to escape the crystal restraints, 12 methods for disabling the alien equipment, and 4 separate routes out of the chamber. More importantly, she understood now why the Vorthons had chosen to study humans through torture. They were trying to map human psychological responses, looking for weaknesses in the species that had been spreading across the galaxy faster than any other race. The Vorthon Empire had conquered hundreds of civilizations by first understanding how their minds worked under stress. But they had made a critical error. They assumed that breaking a human mind would reveal human limitations. Instead, they had triggered an evolutionary response that most humans never experienced because most humans never died and came back. Nara began to move her fingers, testing the restraints. The crystal bonds were strong, but they were designed to hold a frightened, weakened prisoner. They were not built to contain someone who felt no fear and understood exactly how much force she could apply before the molecular bonds holding the crystal together would fail. She waited until both aliens had their backs turned, then applied pressure to 3 specific points on her left restraint. The crystal cracked silently, the fracture lines spreading through the material like a spider web. One sharp twist, and her left hand was free. The freedom of that hand opened up dozens of new possibilities. She could reach 2 of the hanging instruments, access part of the chair's control interface, and work on freeing her other limbs. But she did not rush. Rushing was what frightened people did, and Nara was no longer capable of fear. Instead, she observed and planned. Commander Kira was reviewing data from her death, probably trying to understand why human physiology had failed earlier than predicted. Thex was calibrating instruments for the next prisoner, making adjustments based on what it had learned from her responses. Neither alien had weapons drawn. Why would they? Their prisoner was dead, and they were alone in their own ship surrounded by their own soldiers. They felt completely safe. Nara freed her right hand, then her legs, moving so quietly that the restraint seemed to dissolve rather than break. She remained sitting in the chair, looking exactly as she had when dead, while her mind processed the alien technology around her. The Vorthans used a form of bio-integrated crystal tech that responded to neural impulses. Their instruments were literally connected to their thought patterns, controlled by intentions rather than physical manipulation. It was elegant, efficient, and completely vulnerable to someone who understood both the technology and the psychology behind it. Because Nara now understood both. Her death and return had not just eliminated her fear. It had expanded her cognitive abilities in ways that felt almost supernatural, but were actually completely natural evolutionary responses that humans had never needed to access before. She stood up from the chair. The movement was so smooth and silent that neither alien noticed immediately. When Commander Kira finally turned around, it found Nara standing calmly beside the torture chair, no longer restrained, no longer showing any signs of distress. Impossible, Thex hissed, its translator struggling with sounds of shock. She is dead. The readings showed death. Hello, Nara said politely. I got better. Commander Kira reached for its weapon, but Nara was already moving. She grabbed one of the hanging neural disruptors and, with movements too fast for alien eyes to follow, rewired its targeting system and activated it. The device that had been designed to cause unbearable pain to human nervous systems worked very differently on Vorthan crystal biology. Instead of agony, it caused complete neural disruption. Commander Kira collapsed, its light patterns flickering wildly before going dark. Thex backed away, making sounds of alarm that its translator could not convert. But Nara was not interested in causing unnecessary harm. She had learned everything she needed to know about Vorthan psychology during her torture, and she understood that Thex was not evil in any human sense. It was simply a creature doing what its evolution and culture had programmed it to do. I'm not going to hurt you, she said calmly, but I need you to understand something important. She approached Thex slowly, her movements non-threatening but inexorable. Your empire studies other species to find their breaking points. You've conquered hundreds of civilizations by learning exactly how much pressure their minds can take before they snap. Thex pressed against the wall, its crystal body pulsing with what Nara recognized as fear. It was probably the first time in the creature's life it had experienced genuine terror. But you made a mistake with humans, Nara continued. You assumed that our breaking point was our limit. You thought that death was the end of human resistance. She reached out and touched Thex's crystal surface gently, and through that contact she felt the alien's mind. The bio-integrated nature of Vorthan technology worked both ways. If they could control their instruments with thoughts, then someone who understood their neural patterns could read their thoughts as well. You want to know what makes humans dangerous? She asked, seeing through Thex's memories, learning the locations of the other prisoners, the ship's layout, its defenses and weaknesses. We don't have breaking points, we have breakthrough points. Every time you think you've destroyed us, you've actually made us stronger. Through Thex's mind, She felt the alien's growing horror as it began to understand what she had become. The Vortons had files on hundreds of species, detailed psychological profiles built from millennia of conquest and study. But their files on humans were incomplete, missing the most crucial piece of information. Nara moved through the alien ship like water flowing downhill, finding the path of least resistance while being utterly unstoppable. The corridors that had confused her before now made perfect sense, their twisted geometry revealing patterns that followed Vorthon's psychological architecture rather than human engineering principles. She understood now that the ship was designed to be disorienting to prisoners, but that same design made it predictable once you grasped the underlying logic. The first group of Vorthon soldiers she encountered never saw her coming. She had learned from Thex's memories that their visual perception worked differently than human sight, focused on detecting movement and energy signatures rather than shape recognition. By moving at specific speeds and staying close to the crystal walls, she became effectively invisible to their senses. She did not kill them. Death was not her goal, and unnecessary violence would only complicate her mission. Instead, she used their own bio-integrated technology against them. A touch to the right nerve cluster while they were distracted caused temporary paralysis. Their weapons, designed to respond to Vorthon neural patterns, shut down when she interfaced with their control systems, using knowledge she had absorbed from Thex's mind. Within minutes, she had neutralized an entire patrol without raising any alarms. The soldiers lay unconscious in an equipment bay, their weapons safely deactivated. They would wake up in a few hours with headaches and no clear memory of what had happened to them. Nara felt no satisfaction from this victory. The emotion that might once have driven her toward revenge or triumph had been burned away in her death in return. What remained was pure purpose, as clean and focused as a laser cutting through metal. She found the first group of human prisoners, 3 levels down from the torture chamber. They were being held in a larger version of the cell she had occupied, with 24 colonists crowded together behind energy barriers. Many of them showed signs of interrogation, though nothing as severe as what she had endured. Hana looked up when Nara appeared outside their cell and her face went white. "Nara? But they said you were dead. We heard them talking about it." "I was," Nara replied simply, studying the energy barrier. The containment system was more sophisticated than it appeared, with multiple redundant power sources and failsafes. But sophistication meant complexity, and complexity meant vulnerabilities. She pressed her palm against the control panel beside the cell. The bio-integrated crystal technology read her as a hostile presence and began defensive protocols, but Nara had expected this. While the system tried to identify and neutralize the threat she represented, she was already inside its decision-making processes, rewriting them from within. The energy barrier flickered and disappeared. "How did you do that?" asked Mook, staring at her with a mixture of relief and confusion. "I learned," Nara said. "Everyone needs to stay close to me and do exactly what I say. We're leaving, but first we need to collect the others." As they moved through the ship, Nara found that her enhanced cognitive abilities extended beyond technology to people as well. She could read the emotional states of her fellow prisoners, understanding their fear and confusion as clearly as if they had spoken their thoughts aloud. Most were still processing the trauma of capture and torture, their minds working slowly through shock and disbelief. But some were beginning to notice that she had changed in fundamental ways. Her movements were too precise, her awareness too complete, her calm too perfect for someone who had supposedly died and returned. "Nara," whispered Gina, a young woman who had worked in colony communications. "Your eyes are different." Nara glanced at her reflection in a crystal wall panel. Her eyes, once brown and warm, now held depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. It was not a physical change, but something deeper, as if her death had connected her to knowledge that extended far beyond individual human experience. "Many things are different now," she said, "but I'm still me. I'm still trying to get everyone home safely." They found the second group of prisoners being prepared for interrogation. Nara watched through the crystal walls as Vorthon technicians calibrated torture devices similar to the ones that had killed her. 3 human colonists were restrained in chairs, their faces tight with terror, as the aliens prepared to begin their work. This time, Nara felt something that might have been anger, though it was colder and more focused than any emotion she had experienced in life. These aliens were preparing to inflict the same suffering on her people that had driven her past death itself. They had learned nothing from her return. She would have to teach them more directly. The interrogation chamber had 6 Vorthan technicians and 2 soldiers. Nara entered through a maintenance hatch she had located by interfacing with the ship's environmental systems. Her approach was silent and methodical, moving through shadows and blind spots with mechanical precision. The first technician she touched collapsed without a sound, its bio-integrated nervous system overwhelmed by feedback from its own equipment. Nara had turned its neural interface against itself, creating a cascade failure that shut down its consciousness without permanent damage. The second and third went down just as quietly. By the time the remaining Vorthons realized they were under attack, half their number was already unconscious on the floor. The soldiers reacted faster, raising weapons and calling out in their wind chime language. But Nara was no longer limited by human reaction times. Her enhanced awareness let her process their movements and intentions before they had fully formed them. She moved between their energy blasts like she was dancing, each step perfectly calculated to avoid harm while bringing her closer to her targets. One soldier managed to activate an alarm before Nara reached it. Warning lights began flashing throughout the chamber, and she could feel the ship's defensive systems coming online. Security doors began sealing. Emergency protocols activated, and additional soldiers would be converging on this location within minutes. But that was exactly what she wanted. While her fellow prisoners freed their 3 companions from the torture chairs, Nara interfaced with the chamber's control systems. The room's bio-integrated technology was more powerful than anything she had accessed before, directly connected to the ship's central computer networks. Through those connections, she reached into the Vorthon vessel's electronic nervous system. What she found there was beyond anything she had imagined. The ship was not just a vehicle but a living entity, its crystal structure grown rather than built, its systems integrated with the collective consciousness of its crew. Every Vorthon aboard was connected to every other, sharing thoughts and experiences through their bio-integrated technology, and now Nara was connected to all of them. She felt their surprise as she appeared in their shared mental space. She experienced their confusion as they tried to understand what she was, their growing fear as they realized that a supposedly inferior species had somehow penetrated their most secure systems. But more than that, she gained access to their collective knowledge. Ship schematics, crew locations, weapon systems, defensive capabilities, everything flooded into her consciousness in a rush of crystal-clear information. "Can you get us to the escape pods?" asked Hana, helping support one of the rescued prisoners who was still weak from torture. "No," Nara replied, her hand still interfaced with the control systems. "We're not escaping. We're taking the ship." The humans stared at her in shock. "Nara, there are hundreds of aliens aboard this vessel. We can't fight them all." "We don't need to fight them. We just need to think differently than they do." Through the ship's communication systems, Nara addressed the entire Vorthan crew. When she spoke, her words appeared in every mind connected to the ship's network, translated automatically into their crystalline thought patterns. "I am Nara Kim of the human colony New Soul. Your empire tortured me to death because you wanted to understand human weaknesses. Instead, you discovered something about human strength that your files never recorded." She felt their collective attention focusing on her, hundreds of alien minds trying to comprehend what they were experiencing. "Humans, do not break the way other species break. When you push us past our limits, we don't shatter. We evolve. You killed me and I came back different, stronger, connected to capabilities that normal humans never access because they never need to." Through the ship's sensors, she began demonstrating those capabilities. Environmental systems throughout, the vessel began shifting, temperature and atmospheric composition changing to levels that were uncomfortable for Vorthons, but perfectly suited for humans. Gravity fields fluctuated, creating zones of altered physics that served no purpose except to show that she could control them. Your mistake was assuming that torture reveals truth about the victim. But torture only reveals truth about the torturer. You use pain as a tool because you believe that suffering makes beings more controllable. You have built an empire on the idea that fear is the ultimate weapon. She paused, feeling their confusion and growing alarm through the shared network. But humans have something your empire has never encountered. We have the ability to transform our greatest traumas into our greatest strengths. Every time you think you have found our breaking point, you have actually found our breakthrough point. The journey back to New Sol took 18 hours, but for Nara it felt like minutes. Her consciousness was spread throughout the Vorthan ship's systems, monitoring everything simultaneously, while her body remained in the central control chamber. The rescued human prisoners had found quarters and were trying to rest, though most were still too shocked by recent events to sleep properly. Through the ship's sensors, Nara watched the familiar star patterns that marked home space growing closer. But she also felt the presence of other vessels, both human and alien, converging on their location. Word of the Vorthan attack had spread, and New Sol's distress calls had reached nearby colonies and military outposts. More concerning was the Vorthan response. Through the ship's long-range communication arrays, she detected encrypted transmissions between this vessel and other parts of the Empire. They were trying to understand what had happened, how a single human prisoner had gained control of one of their most advanced ships. She decided to help them understand. Accessing the ship's primary communication system, Nara began broadcasting on all frequencies used by the Vorthan Empire. Her signal would reach every vessel, every outpost, every world under their control. When she spoke, her words would be heard by millions of crystal beings who had never imagined that their victims might someday speak back. Attention Vorthan, Empire. This is Narration, formerly prisoner 779 aboard your vessel Shard of Conquest. I am speaking to you from your own ship, using your own technology, with your own crew as witnesses to what I am about to tell you. She felt the collective shock ripple through Vorthan space as her transmission reached monitoring stations and command centers across their territory. Emergency protocols activated on dozens of worlds as military leaders tried to comprehend how a human had gained access to their most secure communication networks. 43 hours ago, your forces attacked the human colony of New Sol. You destroyed our defenses, captured our citizens, and brought us aboard your ships for interrogation. You tortured us because you wanted information about human military capabilities. Through the ship's sensors, she could see New Sol growing larger in the viewport. The colony looked different now, with emergency shelters deployed and defense platforms hastily constructed around the settlement. Her brother Day was probably down there somewhere, coordinating rescue efforts and preparing for another attack. Your interrogation specialist, the one you call Thex, used techniques perfected over thousands of years of conquest. Neural disruptors, sensory deprivation, psychological manipulation, everything your empire has learned about breaking the minds of other species. And your methods worked. After 37 minutes of torture, I died. She paused, feeling the growing alarm in Vorthan command centers as they realized what they were hearing. A human was not just speaking to them, but speaking from a position of strength, using their own stolen technology to broadcast across their entire civilization. But death was not the end of my resistance. It was the beginning of my education. When I returned to life, I had changed in ways your psychologists never predicted. The fear that your torture was designed to exploit was gone. In its place was understanding, capability, and purpose that normal humans never access, because normal humans never need to. Through the ship's navigation system, she began the final approach to New Sol. Below them, she could see the colonies, spaceport, and the emergency response teams waiting to receive the returning prisoners. But she could also see something else that made her enhance the ship's sensor resolution. Vorthan vessels were approaching from 3 different directions, moving to intercept them before they could reach the colony. It seemed the Empire was not content to let their stolen ship return home without a fight. You are probably wondering how I gained control of your ship. She continued her broadcast while simultaneously calculating intercept courses and defensive options. The answer is that your bio-integrated technology works both ways. If your thoughts can control machines, then machines can read your thoughts. And if someone understands how your minds work, they can access everything connected to them. She activated the ship's defensive systems, not to attack the approaching Vorthons, but to demonstrate her complete mastery of their technology. Energy shields came online at maximum strength, weapon systems powered up to full readiness, and the vessel's crystal hull began shifting into a more streamlined configuration for combat. But instead of engaging the other ships, she did something unexpected. She opened communication channels to each of the 3 Vorthon vessels and transmitted complete technical specifications for their own ship's systems, including security codes and operational procedures that should have been impossible for any outsider to access. Your empire is built on the principle that knowledge is power, and that superior knowledge guarantees victory. You study other species until you understand their weaknesses, then you exploit those weaknesses to achieve conquest. But you made a critical error in your calculations about humanity. The approaching Vorthon ships had stopped their attack approach, their crews apparently paralyzed by the realization that their most sensitive military secrets were being broadcast by their target. Through their shared communication networks, Nara could feel their confusion and growing terror. You assumed that humans have limits like other species, breaking points beyond which we cannot function. But humans are the only race in the galaxy that transforms trauma into strength. Every time you think you have destroyed us, you have actually taught us how to become something more dangerous than we were before. She guided her captured ship into New Sol's spaceport, landing it gently beside the colony's emergency shelters. Through the ship's external cameras, she could see crowds of colonists gathering to witness the impossible sight of a Vorthon vessel arriving peacefully at their home. Her brother Day was among the first responders, his face a mixture of relief and disbelief as he saw the ship's hatches opening and human prisoners beginning to emerge. But when he saw Nara step out of the vessel, his expression changed to something closer to awe and uncertainty. She looked the same as before, but something in her posture and the way she moved made it clear that fundamental changes had occurred. This was his sister, but also something more than his sister, as if she had become connected to capabilities that extended far beyond individual human consciousness. "Nara?" he called out tentatively. "Hello, Day," she replied, her voice carrying clearly across the spaceport despite speaking at normal volume. "The children from the school, are they safe?" "Yes, they're all safe. You saved them." He approached, cautiously studying her face. "We thought you were dead. The other prisoners said the aliens killed you." "They did. I got better." Through the Vorthon ship's communication array, she resumed her broadcast to the Empire, knowing that her words were being recorded and analyzed by xenobiologists and military strategists across their space. "Let me explain what you have accomplished through your attack on New Sol. You came here seeking information about human weaknesses. Instead, you have created a demonstration of human strength that will be studied and remembered for generations. The E-3 Vorthon ships that had attempted to intercept them were now retreating, their crews apparently unwilling to engage an opponent who had already proven capable of penetrating their most advanced defenses. But Nara knew they would be back with reinforcements, and with new strategies designed to contain the threat she represented. That was exactly what she wanted them to do. You tortured me until I died, and I came back with abilities that no human has ever possessed before. But more importantly, I came back with knowledge of your technology, your psychology, and your weaknesses. Knowledge that I will share with every human colony in the galaxy." She felt the collective panic rippling through Vorthon command structures as they realized the full implications of what she was saying. Their entire military advantage was based on technological superiority and psychological manipulation. But if humans could learn to counter both, if they could turn Vorthon methods against the Empire itself, then the balance of power in the galaxy would shift dramatically. Your Empire has spent millennia perfecting techniques for breaking other species. But you have never encountered a species that becomes stronger when broken. You have never faced beings who can die from your torture and return from that death, fundamentally evolved beyond their previous limitations. Her friend Yuna appeared among the crowd of colonists, her medical training making her one of the first to notice the profound changes in Nara's biosignature. She approached with a scanner, taking readings that made her eyes widen in surprise. Nara, your neural activity is off the charts, and your cellular regeneration rate is accelerated by factors I've never seen before. What did they do to you? They killed me, Nara said simply. And they learned that death is not the end of human resistance. It's just another obstacle for us to overcome. She turned back to address the growing crowd of colonists, but her words were still being broadcast across Vorthen space through the captured ship's communication systems. To every human who hears this message, remember what happened. Here today,